All right, so here we are on the AWS website where they have a program called AWS Activate. So as we can see, they're offering up to $100,000 in AWS credits for eligible startups. And if we look into the details a bit down here, we find out that actually, if you're self-funded or bootstrapped, you actually only get $1,000. But that's still a lot for anyone starting out. And then if you were successful and you raise venture capital, as you can see here, you can get an additional $100,000, which is an incredible amount and something that any sort of growing startup would definitely want to help subsidize their growth early on before you've figured out a revenue model, for instance. Flipping over to Google for Startups, you can see they basically have a very similar deal. You can get up to 100,000 credits to use in Google Cloud or Firebase. And for bootstrap startups, you can get up to $2,000 in cloud credits. So a similar deal as AWS. And in Microsoft's land, looking at Microsoft for startup founders, you can see that for their cloud Azure, you can get $1,000 in credits when you're in the ideation stage, so basically when you're just starting out. And then an additional 5,000 as you start building and scaling your application, and then all the way up to $150,000 as you're scaling it even further. So in total, you can get almost $500,000 in credits across each of the 3 cloud providers. But the challenge is, how do you build your application to be cloud agnostic so you can actually make use of all of these credits for your startup? I'm going to talk a bit about Encore now, which is what we're working on day to day. Encore is a backend development engine, which lets you build an application while only focusing on the business logic. And the platform then understands your application source code and does all the heavy lifting, setting up infrastructure in any of the major cloud providers. So let's look at an example application to see how this might work. So I'm going to log in here. And actually, I'm going to go straight into a test application we've set up. So when you build it with Encore, you get this nice automatically generated architecture diagram that basically shows your entire application. So this is our test application. And what we have here is 5 different services, headers, HTTP, server diff, etc. And we can see how they're actually connected. So server diff here calls the database service and the runtime service. And the database service has a database, clearly. And if we look at what these APIs look like, you can see that here in the API Explorer. And all of this is automatically generated as well by the Encore platform. You can go in and you can call APIs. And what's more is you can see here are all of our different environments. So we have an environment here running in AWS that has these infrastructure resources running RDS for the database, and then these code targets for the other services. And then we also have an environment that's running on Azure using a different database and a different code target. And scrolling down here, you can also see we have an environment running in GCP using a Cloud SQL database and Cloud Run. And flipping quickly over to the application code, we can take a look at any of these services. And we can flip through here. You can see that basically nowhere here in the code are we doing anything to handle these different clouds. That's all taken care of by Encore. So the only thing you need to do is add this annotation, and Encore understands that the function info should actually be exposed as a public API. And when you've constructed your application this way, it's trivial to make use of each of the different cloud providers. So your application is fully cloud agnostic. And that makes it really simple to combine the use of credits across all of the cloud providers, thereby actually unlocking hundreds of thousands of dollars in free credits that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to use. That's it. Good luck.